These horses weigh more than half a ton. Imagine what would happen if you hit one. Since 2010, more than 2,900 road incidents involving horses have been reported to the British Horse Society. Of these, 39 caused rider deaths and 230 resulted in a horse dying from their injuries or being put to sleep. No matter how you feel about horses on the road, it's important to be aware that colliding with one puts you and your vehicle at serious risk. By following these simple steps, you can help protect yourself, your car, and the people around you. When you come across a horse and rider or carriage driver, immediately begin to slow down. Be patient. Wait far enough behind the horse so that you're able to see some tarmac between you and the horse's hooves until the road is clear to safely pass. Don't sound your horn or rev your engine. Pass slowly at a maximum speed of 15 miles per hour and give the horse plenty of room. When you're clear of the horse, carefully move back over to your side of the road and drive away slowly. Only pass a horse if it's safe to do so. Don't try and rush past ahead of oncoming traffic or if vehicles are parked on the opposite side of the road or on a hill or a blind bend. Trying to save a couple of seconds could prove very costly. Horses are animals, and like all animals, even the calmest and most experienced can become scared or intimidated. If the horse becomes unsettled, please be patient and give the rider time to react. Please be respectful that at times, riders may need to ride two abreast. Often this is to protect young or inexperienced horses or riders. Be aware that the rider may ask you to slow down or stop and wait. Riders can often see and hear things that you can't. So to recap, when passing horses, slow down to 15 miles per hour. Be patient. Don't sound your horn or rev your engine. Pass horses wide, at least a car's width. Drive slowly away. Remember, it's not just the horse that will suffer when involved in a road incident. The impact can cause significant damage to a vehicle.
Welcome back to the National Equine Forum. I hope you've been enjoying the live stream today. We've had a great session this morning and now we're back into the final session of the afternoon where we hear from Professor Sue Dyson. She's talking about her rider weight study. We'll also hear from Jim Green. He works for the Hampshire Fire and Rescue Service. He's going to be explaining how can we make our lives safer if it comes to driving your horses, when you're transporting your horses, and obviously we've had a big being safe on the roads as well. So that will be the memorial lecture, and then you'll see who's won this year's Sir Colin Spedding Award. I'm really looking forward to seeing who that is, and you can connect with us on Twitter, get involved in the conversation, just use #HorseHour, #NEF. I hope you enjoy the rest of the live stream.
Breed Survival Trust. So I understand that's hopefully not your consideration of where policing is in our rural communities. So I've got about 5 minutes. I'm a bit out of speed with speed dating, but I will do my best and hopefully you will be interested in another date. I'm Dave Jones, I'm from North Yorkshire. The National Police Chief Council is the group that brings all police chiefs together in the United Kingdom. So I took up the portfolio, which is wildlife crime and rural affairs. So it isn't just rural crime, so I will be advocating on behalf of rural communities with other colleagues such as road safety, domestic abuse and other things that impact on our rural communities. So why am I here? It's just to basically tell you about the fact that we are hoping in the spring to get a new strategy through Chiefs Council, which is directly related to rural affairs and rural crime in particular. What we've done is we listened to our communities, we've done a couple of national surveys, some of it is not good reading. We've lost connectivity with some of our rural communities. And if you treat communities as a homogenous group, you're not going to get anywhere. So what we've tried to do is reach out not only to the farming community, the agricultural community, but also specific sectors within that group. So why are we doing it? We're trying to do it to make sure that we have that connectivity. I'm an industry that survives on information and also legitimacy. So if you don't think we're listening to your concerns and doing something about it, we're in a bad place. So one of the things we've done is done a lot of engagement internally within our police sector, but also with the Horse Society, the NFU Mutual, Rural England, etc. just to get a feel from people. So we've been able to identify some priorities. Those priorities are about 6 that we're going to concentrate coming from yourselves and from our local communities. So farm machinery, plant and vehicle theft, livestock offences. We're looking at both the theft of and the worrying of said, fuel theft, both residential and from businesses, fly tipping, although local authorities have the lead, it's a really significant impact on all of our communities. Poaching, like hare coursing, although a wildlife crime issue, there is a crossover between the 2 portfolios. And equine crime. So each of those will have an expert lead that will reach out to the stakeholder groups and hopefully inform the way that we're doing stuff. So I'm going to get Dave Smith from Kent, who's in the audience, to stand up. Dave is going to be our expert, who's from Kent Police, and he will be reaching out to a lot of people here and has already done so to advance our cause with your good selves. So the next step is to get it through council, through chiefs, who obviously, like me, are big advocates in rural affairs, having had the experience of being a police officer in Manchester. This was high on our list of priorities, as you can imagine. So equine crime. These are the key areas. I won't go through them. If that doesn't resonate, please tell me or Dave, because then we've got it wrong. If these are the things bothering you, then these are the things we need to work with you to tackle. So how are we going to do it? Like most things, you only ever achieve things people and problem solving. That's about understanding the issues of concern. So we are going to work with the British Horse Society, and we have been doing, RSPCA, local authorities, etc., to make sure that we've got the right people in the room to come up with the right solutions. So Dave will lead on what's known as a priority group for equine crime, and he will also be reaching out for the expertise from those various organisations. This approach has been proven effective in my own force. I'm going to embarrass Hannah McPeak, who's from North Yorkshire Police Task Force, Rural Task Force, who is actually our dedicated equine police officer. She is a police officer, but she also likes to ride horses as well, which is very useful in this topic area. So she's been doing an awful lot of work around crime prevention, and the way that we operate is we have a 4-tier approach to dealing with any problem, whether or not it's counter-terrorism or road safety. We look at how do we prevent this happening in the first place. So there's lots that's been resonating today around how we identify risk, how we identify engineering opportunities to design out crime, for example. Intelligence is our lifeblood. If you don't ring us, if you don't feel like ringing us because you don't get the right response, or we don't understand what you're saying, all of that gets in the way of providing us with the right information so we can do the right analysis to hopefully then target and do the enforcement bit, which is obviously our bread and butter. The reassurance bit is actually you need to know we care, and we do, and we need to ensure that we show that by responding to your issues of concern. So, one thing you can do, which has been shown to be very effective, is to join one of our watch schemes that are across the United Kingdom. And this, again, is about being eyes and ears around the way in which we can provide a service to the public. So, somebody once described rural policing as a bit like trying to cover a double bed with a single duvet. So we are constantly moving resources around. My own force area, I cover 3,000 square miles. And obviously, unlike the City Police, they have 1 square mile. So there is a difference. The other thing, just a little fact before I finish, is that apparently there were 300,000 horses in the City of London in 1874. There are now 9 working horses. They belong to the City of London Police. So there is a long connectivity between the police service and the use, particularly from a working perspective, of police horses. So we're hoping that through the strategy we can reach out and connect with you. Please tell us if we're getting it wrong. We will respond, and we will also make sure that we provide effective problem solving going forward. Because there's a great quote from President Lyndon Johnson who said, "There are no problems we cannot solve together, and very few we can solve by ourselves." And I hope that's about 5 minutes. That's great. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And please, if you've thought of areas that weren't on that slide, please let the people here today know, because it would be really helpful so that it is an interactive sort of thing to build on. Okay, our second topical slot is about heavy horses, and I'm delighted to welcome Nigel Oakley, who's the heavy horse ambassador for Rare Breed Survival Trust, who's going to talk about Suffolks and the plight of the Suffolks as heavy horses. So, Nigel, over to you.
Your Royal Highness, Lords, ladies and gentlemen, I am represent the rare breeds, and I think I'm probably on their watch list. Although most land work now is done by mechanical means, the RBST and a good many of us think there is still a place for the heavy horse. The RBST was founded in 1973, and since that date we haven't lost one native breed. The RBST works to monitor, save and promote UK native breeds of livestock. They monitor the number of rare and native breeds. Every year data is collected from breed societies, and the number of animals registered in a year are used to estimate the total number of breeding females, producing their annual watch list. They promote threats to the breed, such as inbreeding and geographical concentration. RBST monitor and try to reduce these. They save genetics in the UK National Livestock Gene Bank. If a breed were to become extinct, this still can be used to revive the breed. They save animals in emergencies. RBST will buy genetically important stock and place that in approved breeding centres. They promote the breeding, registration and use of rare and native breeds through their network of staff, members, support groups and partners. Currently, their main campaign focuses on the UK's breeds of heavy horse. Their aim is to raise awareness of the unique and important animals and to fundraise a collection for each breed of heavy horse for inclusion in the UK National Livestock Gene Bank. There are 3 breeds of heavy horse in the United Kingdom: the Shire, the Clydesdale and the Suffolk. The Shire is category 4, which is the most numerous of the breeds. Before mechanisation, the Shire was, well, the mainstay in agriculture and in industry. The Shire and then the Clydesdale, which is category 3, have both got a joint that can manage road work, so they were quite popular with the breweries and with industrial work, whereas the Suffolk, although the Suffolk is category 1, it's the oldest of the breed, but unfortunately the most rare. It is category 1, categorised as critically endangered. There were 244 filly horses bred last year, and only 14 of those were Suffolks. So you can see the Suffolk is in dire straits. I keep 8 Suffolks and 2 Shires at home, and as a power of energy, they were bred to walk. Hang on, I'll try again. They were bred to work at the walk, and were particularly bred for agricultural use. I still use mine quite intensely at home. It's said that the whole 3 breeds are in a serious state of affairs. Now, I'd be grateful if you could watch the video, which will show further details of this campaign.
Spent £1.5 million on those brand new facilities here. We've built a state-of-the-art laboratory. We've made an extender or medium we put into the seam, and that actually frees it at minus 196 degrees. So in 10, 20, 30 or 40 years time, we can actually repopulate a generation with that genetic line. It's amazing how you can bring something back to life that is so cold and then straight away get pregnancies. It's quite amazing.
Well, there we are. As I said, there's only 14 of that 244 were Suffolks. I would like to conclude by quoting from His Majesty King George VI, who said, "The wildlife of today is not ours to dispose of as we please. We have it in trust and we must account for it to those who come after." If you substitute wildlife for rare breeds, I think our obligation in a nutshell. Thank you for your attention. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nigel. Well-made presentation. Thank you. If you do have ideas about future topical slots, literally 5-minute things, please can you let us know in the various feedback forms, which I'll talk about at the end of the meeting. Right, we're moving on to now an important presentation. We did a research session last year that was very well received. So we're including this year a presentation from Sue Dyson looking at the influence of riders' body weight ratios on equine gait and behaviour study. Is when those of a certain girth tend to hold our stomachs in. So, Sue, over to you.
Rider size is a controversial issue, and there is a growing body of evidence that the human population is getting larger. However, there is limited evidence-based information about rider size and equine performance. There are a limited number of studies that have investigated the effect of weight, but these have largely been based on the use of dead weight, not live rider weight. This is a multifactorial issue. Factors that affect the horse are its height, its weight, its body condition score, its conformation, its fitness, and its soundness. For the rider, it is not only the weight that may be influential, but their fitness, their symmetry, balance, postural control, and previous injury. The activity with which the horse is engaged is also particularly relevant. The type of work, the intensity of work, the duration of that work, and the terrain over which the horse is being exercised. And then lastly, there's the saddle, the load-bearing area, and the fit and suitability, not only for the horse, but also for the rider. The importance of rider-to-horse body weight ratios was highlighted at the second International Saddle Research Trust workshop. And as a result of that, an initiative was taken forward by the British Equestrian Federation and World Horse Welfare, and they instigated a meeting attended by a number of the equine bodies from this country to discuss the issue, highlight priorities, and to seek funding from the industry for the research. And from this pilot study was born. This study aimed to assess gaits and behavioural responses in horses ridden by 4 riders of similar ability but differing in body weight. It also aimed to assess the response to back palpation, the presence or absence of muscle tension or pain before and after exercise, to determine back dimension changes with exercise, to measure the magnitude and distribution of forces under the saddle during exercise, and lastly, to measure physiological responses to exercise with the 4 different riders. This afternoon, I can only focus on the gait and behavioural responses. This was a prospective, randomised crossover study involving 6 horses and 4 riders. The study was approved by the Clinical Ethical Review Committee of the Animal Health Trust. We had 6 horses which were used in the test, plus 2 reserves. The horses were recruited based on the fact that they were in full work and capable of being worked on the bit in trot and canter for a minimum of 30 minutes twice daily. All the horses were selected by myself, and I'm a Royal College of Veterinary Surgeons specialist in equine orthopaedics, between 6 and 8 weeks prior to the study. For inclusion in the study, the horses had to show no greater than a grade 1 out of 8 lameness in a single limb when ridden. They had to be of body condition score between 5 and 7 on a scale of 1 to 9. They had to be of body weight between 500 and 600 kilograms so that the rider to horse body weight ratio would be between 10 and 12% for the lightweight rider, greater than 12 and up to 15% for the moderate rider, over 15 but less than 18% for the heavy rider, and greater than 20% for the very heavy rider. The owners agreed that an independent, qualified saddle fitter would assess saddle fit and make adjustments as deemed necessary, ideally more than 1 month prior to the study, in order to minimise any adverse influences over the horse's performance. Our 4 riders were volunteers. They all rode to a similar standard but differed in body weight. The light rider was an experienced rider who had competed in British eventing to intermediate level and in British dressage. She was a British Horse Society intermediate instructor and had professional riding experience of more than 25 years, and at the time of the study was an equine technician at the Animal Health Trust. The moderate rider was also an experienced rider who had competed up to medium level in British dressage. She had professional riding experience of 5 years and was also an equine technician at the Animal Health Trust. Our heavy rider was a British Horse Society instructor with professional riding experience of more than 25 years. And our very heavy rider was an experienced rider for more than 25 years. These were our 6 horses. You can see that they're somewhat variable in their shape and stamp. We were somewhat disappointed when the horses arrived at World Horse Welfare, which is where we carried out the study, to find that horse 3, body score condition score 8, and horse 5, body condition score 7.5, had increased in their body condition score since they had been first evaluated 4 to 6 weeks previously. The tack, including the girth, and any additional saddle pads and or numner worn by each horse each day, together with the pliance format, were weighed, and the approximate weight for each horse was 10 kilograms. The study took place over 5 days. On each morning, at 7 o'clock, the horses were weighed, and at 8 o'clock, each rider was weighed, wearing their riding equipment. We also measured the height of the riders, which enabled us to calculate the body mass index. We can see that our riders varied in height from between 162 and 185.5 centimetres. Their mean weights ranged from 60.8 to 142.1 kilograms. The body mass index is the weight divided by the height squared. If we compare with what is recommended as being normal or overweight or obese, we can see that both our moderate and our heavy riders were both categorised as being overweight. Our very heavy rider was obese. We evaluated the gait with the horses moving in hand before each test, and we also evaluated the gait throughout the test, both subjectively and objectively. For the objective measurements, we had placed inertial measurement units on the horse's pelvis, on the withers, and on the pole. We assessed the saddle fit for the rider and the rider's position in the saddle. With respect to the length of the saddle being appropriate or otherwise for the rider, it was deemed to be correct if the rider was sitting in the centre of the saddle with clearance both in front and behind the rider's seat. The saddle was deemed to be short if the rider was sitting on the back of the cantle, as we see with the heavy rider. The saddle seat was deemed to be very short if the rider's seat extended beyond the back of the cantle. Each rider rode each horse in a randomised order. They performed a standardised 30-minute exercise protocol that consisted mainly of trot and canter, and horses were ridden in their usual tack. The test was called by Rebecca Young, who also recorded any untoward events, like, for example, the horse spooking in the corner. Selective parts of each test, standardised parts, were video recorded by Anne Bondy for subsequent evaluation of the horse's behaviour. Cheryl Chan and Mary Tivey, who were responsible for the heart rate and respiratory rate monitoring, were also responsible for documenting the time at which the horse performed transitions, so that could be compared with the force mat data that was being acquired throughout the ridden test. We have performed a number of behavioural studies in ridden horses, supported by the Saddle Research Trust and World Horse Welfare. And we have developed an ethogram, which is a description of behaviours which we use during ridden exercise. We have identified, based on comparison between non-lame and lame horses, 24 behavioural markers which are most consistently associated with musculoskeletal pain. By comparison of lame and non-lame horses, we have been able to show that display of 8 or greater of these behavioural markers is likely to reflect underlying musculoskeletal pain. We have facial markers, the ears being back for more than 5 seconds or repeatedly placed backwards. Aspects of the eye expression, an intense stare, partial complete closure of the eyelids, or exposure of the white of the eye. The tongue being exposed or protruding. The mouth being open for more than 10 seconds. The bit being pulled through to one side. We have body markers. The head being tossed up and down in a repeated fashion. The head moving sideways repeatedly. The head being tilted on one side. And the movement of the tail either being clamped to the back of the horse or constantly swishing in a vigorous fashion. There are also gait markers, repeated changes in rhythm, the horse becoming rushed or slowing in its rhythm. Spontaneous changes of gait, for example, breaking from canter to trot. The horse moving on 3 tracks, as we see here. Rhythms to go forwards, dragging the toe, stumbling. Sudden changes of direction against the rider's edge, and bucking and rearing. The behaviour during the ridden test was assessed prospectively during every test by myself. The behaviour was also assessed retrospectively from video recordings of standardised sections of each test. We had a predetermined abandonment protocol. If a horse demonstrated 10 or greater of the 24 behavioural markers, the test was terminated immediately by the blowing of a whistle. If the horse developed a grade 3 or greater lameness in a single limb, or grade 2 out of 8 lameness in 2 or more limbs, again the test was terminated immediately. All the tests for the heavy rider and for the very heavy rider were abandoned. For the very heavy rider, all the horses became lame. For the heavy rider, 5 horses became lame and 1 demonstrated 10 behavioural markers in canter. 1 test out of 12 for the moderate rider was also abandoned due to lameness. There was a difference between the very heavy and the heavy riders in terms of how long the test was performed before it had to be terminated. For the heavy rider, the mean time was 16.6 minutes, with a range of 9 to 25.5, whereas for the very heavy rider, there was a mean of 8.3 minutes, with a range of 6 to 19. We therefore, after each rider had ridden every horse, changed the protocol, and only the light and moderate riders were repeated, because we felt it would have been unethical to repeat the tests with the heavy or the very heavy rider. This summarises the types of lameness shown by the horses, we can see that for horse 3, on each occasion that the test was abandoned, the horse was lame on the left hind limb. However, for horse 5, on one occasion it showed a right forelimb lameness and left hind limb lameness, and with another rider it showed a left forelimb lameness. And horse 6, lame left hind with one rider and lame right fore with another. So it was not consistent in which limb every horse became lame. If the test was abandoned, either due to more than 10 behavioural markers or because of lameness, the gait was re-evaluated 45 minutes later in hand, and all horses appeared non-lame at walk and trot in hand. At the end of the 5 days, all horses were moving as well or better than when they started, when ridden by the light and moderate riders. When we looked at the comparison between my subjective evaluation of the gait and the objective evaluation of the gait, we found that the lame limb was in agreement for all horses. However, there were very significant variations among individual horses' responses to riders, which is not surprising. There were some significant differences among the riders. Here we see results for hip height difference on the left rein and the right rein. And here we can see the variation between the left and right sides, and there is no significantly statistical difference between any of the riders. However, when we look on the right rein, we can see that the direction of asymmetry is significantly different for the very heavy rider compared with the other riders. Despite our attempts to improve the fit of owner's tack prior to the study, saddle fit was not perfect, but was considered adequate for the purposes of the investigation. Although previous work has shown that ill-fitting saddles have the potential to adversely influence force distribution and magnitude in equine performance, the horses performed very satisfactorily despite the ill-fitting saddles with riders L and M. And this mimics the situation in the field. When the rider is ridden by different riders, the saddle fit is unlikely to fit all riders. The length of the saddle was appropriate for riders L and M. Rider H sat on the back of the saddle for 5 of the 6 horses, and rider very heavy was over the back of the saddle in all horses. The shoulder, hip, and heel were not in alignment for any of the horses for both the heavy and the very heavy rider. The normal rider of horse 2 was 92 kilograms, similar to the rider weight H. But the normal rider was considerably shorter, being only 157 centimetres compared with 185.5. And this additional height is likely to influence their position in the saddle and their ability to be in balance, their weight distribution, and the position of their centre of gravity relative to the horse's centre of gravity. The body mass index of both the moderate and the heavy riders was considered overweight, but all tests were abandoned for the heavy rider, but only 1 of 12 for the moderate rider, which indicates to us that this abandonment is an effect of weight rather than the body mass index. Horses 3 and 5 had increased in body condition score after selection for the study. We have to recognise that that may possibly have an adverse influence on their performance. An overweight horse is less able to work efficiently than a horse of appropriate weight. Obesity potentially compromises equine health. When we look at the behavioural scores, this was the retrospective analysis of the videos, we can see that there were significant differences in the scores for the light and moderate riders compared with the heavier riders. And this was highly statistically significant. Likewise, the differences between the scores for the facial expression of the lighter riders was considerably lower than for the heavier riders. Head position, too, the value was considerably lower for the lighter riders compared with the heavier riders. So we saw significant differences in the total behaviour score, the facial expression score, and the head position score among riders. There were differences in head and tail movement and the gait markers, but they were not statistically significant. So our preliminary conclusions are that clearly there is an effect of rider to horse body weight ratio. There is also potentially the influence of the rider height and therefore their position in the saddle and their weight distribution. Because all the tests for both the heavy and the very heavy riders were abandoned, we do not know what the lower rider horse body weight cutoff may be. The results are not necessarily applicable to lower level activity, for example, hacking at the walk, but we did measure significantly higher forces under the saddle for the very heavy rider. Nor are the results necessarily applicable to fitter animals or those which have been slowly adapted to increasing weight to carry. The results of the study cannot necessarily be transferred to more intense work or work of longer duration. This study does not mean that heavy riders should not ride, but suggests that if they do, they should ride a horse of appropriate size and fitness with a saddle that is correctly fitted, not only for the horse, but also for the rider. And the logical conclusion from that is that it may not be possible to fit a saddle to both the horse and the rider, depending upon the length of the horse's back. Remember, force equals mass times acceleration, so weight has a direct effect on the forces exerted on the horse's back via the saddle. That is why the balance of the rider, the alignment of their shoulder, hip and heel, and their ability to sit are also important. The position of the rider's mass and the horse's centre of gravity are important. We concluded that any adverse influence of less than ideally fitting tack may be accentuated markedly by heavier riders. But this was only a pilot study. There are many unanswered questions. Where is the cutoff between 15 and 18%? And what are the take-home messages? Does the horse-rider combination look right? If it doesn't, it probably isn't. Is the horse's back of long enough length to accommodate a saddle long enough for the rider so that they can sit in the centre of the saddle? Can the rider sit with their shoulder, hip and heel in alignment? Increasing horse body weight is not a solution. The horse and rider should be optimally fit, and regular saddle checks are important for both the horse and for the rider. I need to thank all the organisations that generously donated money for the project, for the groups that provided material in kind, for the riders, and most especially to the very generous horse owners who lent their horses for a total of 6 days. I also have to thank many of the other people that were involved in this study. It was only a pilot study, but it did involve a large number of scientists. Thank you for your attention, and I'd be happy to try and answer any questions.
Thank you very much, Sue. Questions, comments on an important piece of work? Yeah.
Thank you very much. Doug Smith, Riding for the Disabled. So once again, thank you very much for this research. You are underpinning what we've been doing for many, many years. I know it's just the first part of it. Way before I was involved with Riding for the Disabled, we've had a policy about calculating the maximum capacity that our horses can carry. But we don't only take into account weight, we have to take into account disability and the effect that disabilities can have on. We have to be very, very careful for the pairings. But what I think is the potential for this is that there's been a lot of good work done over the last few years about the riding world being seen as non-elitist and inclusive. The last thing we want to be seen is as weightist. So I think what we must make sure goes out, as you said on one of your latter slides, this is a combination issue, not a weight issue. We've all seen the teenager who doesn't want to part with their little pony that'll turn on a tanner and give them threatens change, and doesn't want to move on to a thoroughbred where it's more a case of bridge to engine room. And parents exercising the ponies for the children. So I think what we need to be very careful of, the message that goes out is this is not just about weight. And to evidence that, many years ago, before I got completely overtaken by riding for the disabled, I used to do quite a bit of judging. And one lady I judged was a very handsome woman who was proud of the fact that she stood over 6 foot tall and weighed over 20 stone. She had 2 horses, a Clydesdale and a Shire, both of whom were well over 17.3 and well up to carrying her weight. But her daytime job was as a professional wrestler. So she was so in control of her body, she was very, very light in the saddle. And believe me, when she put leg 2, the horse moved. And she did very well. And I must just add, as a rider, I didn't give her good marks because I was frightened of her.
Any other comments, questions? Clearly, I agree completely. The communications of this needs to be handled very carefully. One there, and then one there, and then we'll have a pause. We'll have to pause.
Eva Maria Brumer from the Anglo-European Stud Book. Thank you very much for a very informative talk. Did you find there was any significant difference between the different types of horses, in that we noticed that obviously these 6 horses were of slightly different body shapes themselves, and this is not just a weight but also a horse type issue? And did you find that there were certain type of horses that might have shown adverse reactions sooner to body weight than others, or were they all the same?
Absolutely not, no. The responses of the 6 horses were remarkably similar.
Thank you, that's very helpful.
Question there.
Thank you. Victoria Highfield from Online for Equine. Firstly, I think that research like this is much needed, and I think it's fantastic. One thing that I'd like to know is what's the next step, really? I know, sorry. From a retailer's point of view, we have an awful lot of demand growing in what's referred to as the curvy rider section. And the level of rider, we're not talking just a walk and trot rider, we're talking riders who are going out, they're low-level eventing. Do you feel that there can be some form of application between this impact and maybe riding at low-level BE? Where do you see the research going?
Well, I think that we need to look closer at the riders who are approximately in the 90 to 95 kilo area, because these are clearly the level at which we're going to have the most problems. In saying that, we can have an equal problem with an adult riding a small pony, a normal size. I could get on a small pony and still be too big for it. But we need to focus on around the 92 kilogram mark, and with riders of different heights, because we've identified the fact that the position of the rider in the saddle is going to be influenced by their height and the fit of the saddle to them. So we need to repeat the study using a very similar design, but with several riders who are around the 92 kilogram level of different height, and crossing over the study so they do it once with a normal saddle and once in a saddle that fits them, the individual rider. So that's what we would like to do, but that obviously is dependent on funding. These studies don't happen without funding.
Good. Okay, thank you very much, Sue. It's important work, and it's something that we clearly like to be kept informed with. So thank you very much. We're now moving on to the annual memorial lecture. This is our 3rd memorial lecture, and they're given each year in connection with previous winners of the Sir Colin Spedding Award, and you've got details about this in your programme. Jim Green was last winner, but he was unable to be with us last year to receive his award as he was away in America, actually in University of California in Davis. And therefore Professor Josh Slater, who is here, received the award on his behalf. And he did it very well. But I'm delighted that Jim is here now, and he's now going to give his lecture on equine emergency rescue, managing risk and meeting societal needs. Jim, over to you.
Thank you. Your Royal Highness, ladies and gentlemen, it's a real privilege to be here with you today to give you a bit of an oversight really as to the journey that we've taken in regard to the emergency response to equines in rescue situations. And I'm going to touch on 3 areas today. Firstly, the drivers for change. Secondly, the current situation. And thirdly, moving on to the future challenges for the initiative. Now, I'm really pleased as an emergency responder that a lot of the talk today has been around risk, because that's the sort of stuff that I deal with on a daily basis. And it's operational risk that really led us to change the way that we responded to animal incidents in the UK Fire and Rescue Service. It was spoken earlier about how many people these days do not have a natural affinity with horses, they don't have contact with horses, they haven't grown up with horses. And I think it's fair to say that historically we got away with managing animal rescues because many of our rural firefighters came from an agricultural background. That's not the case these days. And so there's more and more chance of them becoming injured through something that is actually quite an unpredictable hazardous material to deal with. And there's very few situations in the fire service these days that we wouldn't have the skills and the knowledge and the procedures to actually resolve. But animal rescues was one of those situations where we were still going out, you know, with the big red toolbox and a bunch of firefighters to help the lady or the gentleman with their horse. And we were very much reliant on advice from the vet or from the member of the public to get that situation resolved. And clearly, in these days of health and safety, it's important that we prepare our employees to deal with the risks that they're going to face in their operational lives. So that risk is not just about the emergency responders being at risk, it's also about the risks to the owner, to members of the wider public in the situations we're dealing with, and to the horse itself. Secondly, I think another driver was welfare. Now, we might have gone out historically and done the very best we could, but I think through our recent years and our now better understanding of these situations and how to deal with them, I think that actually the outcomes might have not been in the best interest of the horse. You know, spending hours trying to get the big heavy object out of the bog or out of the grid or out of the trailer crash doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to have a good outcome. And I think to be better, have a better professional approach to this is going to be in the best interest of welfare. And thirdly, something that the vet school in California that I've been working for the last year, their strapline was around meeting societal needs. And I think that's a really important thing, that this equine rescue initiative is about managing risk. It's also about meeting societal needs. This human-animal bond is really an important factor to consider at rescues. This is why members of the public will put themselves at risk in order to save animals. And it's important for us as emergency responders to understand that firstly there's an expectation that we will help, but secondly, if we can't, then that leaves a void and other people will try and fill that void and they will put themselves at risk. And that is something that is really unacceptable. So there are a number of reasons why we've had to change over the last few years. And really we've understood that if we're going to rescue animals in a professional manner and we're going to consider them as a casualty-centred rescue, then this needs to be a partnership. And it was back in 2007, the British Horse Society and the British Equine Vets Association released some protocols, emergency services protocols, and that was supported by Her Royal Highness, and we launched those protocols at Buckingham Palace. And since that time, the journey has taken us primarily it was about the fire service. People were calling for firefighters to be better prepared and have better planning and understanding, but we also understand that this is a partnership. This is about an awareness of animal incidents by all agencies that are going to be involved. There needs to be role-specific training for those organisations, and there needs to be tactical knowledge applied here, because some of these situations are very complex and very dynamic, and they require a good degree of command and control, a good degree of expertise and professional conversation around what the outcome is going to be. The veterinary and rescue and trauma care side of this is really important, and Professor Josh Slater and I set up BARTA, the British Animal Rescue and Trauma Care Association, in 2012, largely to respond to the fact that we needed an umbrella organisation as this was a growing initiative. But one of the focuses of BARTA is around helping veterinarians to be better prepared so that they can interact with us at the multi-agency scene. Surrounding this needs to be policies and governance in our organisations, and again BARTA is going to be leading that drive to maintain the standards and to ensure that the vision is carried through. Now I'm really proud of the fact that in the last 10 years 90% of the UK's fire and rescue services now have an animal rescue component. It's not a statutory duty, it's all about risk, and we have identified that this is a risk we need to respond to. That is really, really good. But what we do know now is that every situation that we might attend as emergency responders may have the presence of animals which will change the dynamics, will change the risks and change the way that we deal with it. So that will bring additional challenges, and we have policies and procedures for all the different incident types we go to, but as soon as you introduce animals into the mix, everything changes. And so what we've done recently is we've developed National Occupational Standards for the Fire and Rescue Service, and this is around preparing and planning for incidents involving animals. Animals are a cross-cutter. They cut across all disciplines and all operations. So if I go to a car crash and there's a dog in the car, if we try to support the casualty, the dog may be fearful or may try and protect the owner, and firefighters are getting injured. If I go to a house fire and there are animals there, then that has a bearing on the activities of the fire crews, who are quite happy to kick down doors and go into a 1,000-degree fire, but they're not quite so happy when they've got a dog on the end of their arm. You know, so that's something that I will have to deal with in my organisation. Planning for the unwanted event is not really just for the emergency services. It really does apply to all of us in the industry. And it was really good to see that the racing industry and the eventing communities are looking at risk and managing risks. But in Australia, they've really embraced the incident management protocols that we've developed through the UK Fire and Rescue Service. And they are now developing a variety of different approaches to managing incidents at shows and events. And it may be something as simple at the local show as managing a deceased horse with dignity. And then as they grow bigger in their event, it may be that they have teams that are available to respond, to deal with the recumbent animal and to manage that situation really effectively. Right up to the really larger events like the Olympics, where they have on site. So, you know, all of the principles that we've applied in the emergency situation, they're directly relating into these type of events. So it's not just about emergency response. As I said just now, veterinary responders are critical to the safe resolution of a large animal rescue. There's not many incidents that I go to as a firefighter where I'm really reliant on someone from another organisation or agency to manage the risk for me. There's certain things that we can do as firefighters and first responders around calming the scene, creating a safe scene, but we are really reliant on our vets who are going to turn up and give us the chemical control often that we're going to need to actually manage our casualty safely. And we have partnerships now with the veterinary associations to deliver training to vets, and we have different levels of training depending on whether they're vet students or practitioners. And it's quite interesting, really, when you think about 1 minute the veterinary practitioner is working through their day's call, the day's jobs, and the next minute they're part of a multi-agency response to a large incident, which requires a great degree of teamwork, a degree of knowledge of their role, their specific role in that incident. And they need to understand how we as first responders apply the incident command system and manage dynamic and complex situations. So we do have different levels of veterinary training. This is an evolving process, and we are very much on a journey and are growing in our understanding. Now, other agencies that we've been, and some of my colleagues here, every morning we get up, we anticipate that we may have to deal with the 1%, which is the day where the tragedy occurs to somebody and their lives are changed forever. Okay, we live and we plan for that 1%. So that means that the way that we want to communicate our passion and our vision for safety is probably different to the audience and the people that are receiving that message. So, as people have talked about today, we need to find way of changing behaviours so that this becomes a normal pattern of behaviour and people then really do understand that it could happen to them. That enables successes. such as our friend Spencer here. If we're all working together, if we understand what we need to do, we are going to have successes like Spencer. He was being driven to an event, his leg went down through the floor of his lorry as they pulled in, and this is the situation where his leg had gone down underneath the lorry and between the back wheels. And working with our veterinary colleagues, we anaesthetised Spencer and we were able to extract him and to recover him, and despite how bad that looks, we actually had a viable horse at the end of it. Other successes like this 10-horse crash. This is a polo team that hit on a major trunk road, and we had 10 horses on board in various states of disrepair, 7 of which were viable as a rescue, and 7 were rescued and continued their lives. So it really is important that all agencies that attend these types of situations understand the requirements and the needs. We're sharing this worldwide. As we said, I've been to the United States recently and working with the University of California, and I was involved with the severe fires in Northern California last September. And what was really important about that year, despite the fact that this is a very strong academic environment and they have real successes and a lot of prowess in that regard, they chose in their endowment report from the veterinary perspective to highlight the fact that they'd saved horses through the work of this British firefighter coming over to enhance their capabilities and response to emergencies. So that for me was a really important thing. And challenges going forwards. Well, first of all, we've got financial challenges in the Fire and Rescue Service and other agencies. So that means that we're going to see a reduced investment, and that means that we're going to see less progress potentially. I've been in full-time animal rescue manager's role for 10 years. That role is no longer there. So that has a big effect on me and the amount of work that I can do. We're going to see increasing wide-scale incidents such as flooding in the UK. That means there's pressure on responders, pressure on the economy. The Farm Animal Welfare Committee, I contributed to some research they were doing for an opinion paper to government in 2012, where they showed that there was a lack of capability in regard of livestock disasters and emergencies in the UK. And so we as a Fire and Rescue Service have been gearing up, but that was largely for the single animal incident, not necessarily the wider scale event. And so if we want sustainability to maintain the vision and develop the standards, we want the opportunity to innovate and develop, we need to work as a team. We need to have a partnership. And BARTA really want to take a role in that as the hub and have everybody else as stakeholders that are supporting that innovation and development. And so we really would encourage you to get involved with BARTA. And so lastly, I'd just like to say thank you so much to you all for the award that I received last year. It meant a lot. I wasn't here to receive it. I was training firefighters, but where I was in America, that was something that they really thought was special, and they were really thinking about you guys having the meeting last year, and that it was given out. And thank you to Josh for receiving it on my behalf. And so with your support, we will keep going and we will develop this to the next level. And for my colleague with his heavy horses, this was one of the Budweiser Clydesdales. And all the firefighters in America, in UC Davis, had to stop because the Budweiser Clydesdales often came to the university and they were really quite special, so we had to stop our training to go and greet them. And so yeah, that was me with one of the Clydesdales. So yeah, any questions?
Any questions for Jim? Or are you all content? That was a really interesting. Yeah, there. Yep, it's all right, we spotted you.
Thank you. I live on the East Coast, and we have, over the years, rescued several horses that go into ditches, mostly because they're greeding, trying to eat the reeds. So I wholeheartedly thank you for all your work in training local people to rescue horses in a proper manner. But what I'm thinking with the news of people like yourselves losing the funding, do you think it's a time where, rather like the first responders for first aid, that it's a time where equine professionals can step up and be trained by people like yourselves to be equine first responders in emergency situations?
Yeah, thank you. That's a really valid point, and certainly my time in America showed me that the volunteer aspect of emergencies and disasters was a really important factor, something that I will bring back to the work that we're doing here. But on a day-to-day level, it's really important that there's where your capacity ends and where you need to have other professionals to help you, because what we don't want people to do is to put themselves in a position of danger because they didn't have the resources to do something. So, yeah, we've just been doing some training. One of my colleagues went up to Bransby, even training in manual manipulation techniques and use of the harnesses, and that's something that the Horse Trust have been doing with local firefighters at their site, and there's no reason why we can't expand that. And in the same way that we're providing practical training for vets and for veterinary nurses, I think it's really important that we look certainly at professionals that are managing horses on a daily basis to see what level of training would be appropriate. So thank you for that.
Any other thoughts, comments? Great. Well, thank you very much, Jim. Many congratulations for winning. I would now like to invite Her Royal Highness to come to the lectern to present her concluding remarks. And to present the Sir Colin Spedding Award for this year.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, it's a pleasure to join you. I'm sorry I missed this morning. You obviously had a very interesting morning, a very constructive morning too, by the sound of it. I did manage to catch up with some of the speakers, so I haven't missed too much, I hope. But firstly, can I take this opportunity to thank our chairman, Tim Brigstocke, for all his work, for arranging this is already the 26th National Equine Forum, and given this programme today, I'm sure you'll agree that that's a huge and successful piece of work that they've been doing. Picked up quite early, I think, by you, because it was indeed sold out. So I'm delighted to report that we do seem to be providing a programme which really does fit with your interests and your concerns. And to our sponsors and our corporate friends and friends of the forum, for helping to make it possible to be slightly more ambitious in our programme. We're really grateful. And we also have streamlined that relationship. And I'd like to welcome Nigel to the forum family this year as new corporate friends. Thank you too for adding your knowledge and interest. We've had our own developments, as I hope many of you have noticed that while you're here. Firstly, we've launched our own website, and that, of course, it makes really good sense because we've been using the British Equestrian Federation for a number of years, but I hope that having a proper website of our own will make it more of an annual engagement, something we can keep in touch with those who come and those who are interested. And, of course, secondly, today, this has been live streamed for the first time. That's certainly a big change for us, but I hope that it will mean that those who are interested, who aren't able to come, can feel that they are part of this debate and can contribute to it appropriately. And I hope they will have found also it's been a very educational day. And you started by considering the horse industry in a changing world. Well, it always is, but the changes happen all the time. It seems that as soon as you catch up with one sector's changes and new regulations, something else happens. And you have certainly covered that. But I'm delighted that Lord Gardner was able to include the Central Equine Database. How often have I said that? Not much end in view. So I'm really sorry I missed it, but I'm delighted he had the opportunity to do that, along with the Equine ID statutory instrument, which is a crucial part of that. We all, I believe, that it could make quite a serious impact on all that we need to know, where to gather information. And this afternoon you heard a bit about the data that is needed to make changes. And that will add strength to our arm in terms of the data that's available that we need. And the combination of all those parts into the British Horse Council, which I hope will have a real impact on the changes that are going to happen by pulling all those interested parties together. As I came in at the end of the afternoon, and I thoroughly enjoyed this afternoon, I'm not sure we had the whole of the video, did we, for the session of Beaver about Don't Break Your Vet campaign? I'm quite sure where that left us. But can I just make an observation? It's not just about not breaking your vet, don't break your farrier either, because this is really about good handling. It's teaching your animals to have manners and handling them often enough that, when somebody comes, they do behave. Alan has really added to that debate and that understanding of the Society's Dead Slow campaign. It throws up a number of issues, I think, from all of us who ride, and sometimes, with the best will in the world, you have to ride on the road. How you do that, and in what part of the equation you need to be aware of. It is for both riders and drivers to be more aware, and I know I've had my fair share of nearly having my foot taken off by a wing mirror, but it's how the riders respond to that. And my high vis is part of that, but I don't want drivers to think that just because you're not wearing high vis you're not there. It's not an excuse not to look, and that applies to us as drivers as well. And it is this relationship between adding safety layers, which somehow makes people more relaxed about what they're doing. What they're doing is still inherently dangerous. I have a question also about, I noticed that to the road planners, you may have noticed in London there's a great deal of road planning in aid of cyclists. I would mention that quite a lot of the cyclists in one area where they have created an entirely separate road for them, very few cyclists actually use it. But road planners in other parts of the world, I know this is very much down to local authorities, some notice. So when they're in producing new roads, they remember that there are pedestrians, not just pedestrians, but there are cyclists and there are horse riders. But that's rare. And it is raising that awareness of the importance of road planning when you design new roads to take those into consideration. And the rider awareness, please riders, don't go out with your ears full of music and mobile phones. Your ears are a very, very important part of your security system. If you can't hear what's going on, you won't hear whether there's not only a vehicle, but what sort of vehicle is approaching. I like the idea of new high vis in all sorts of places, but I like the idea of a horse not wanting, stopping going out because you haven't put the right high vis on. It conjures up an idea of, not hoof oil, but really high vis hoof oil, which the horse will go, no, I haven't got it. Can't go out without my high vis says. Now, there must be something more sensible. Helmet design, we talked about, and I asked the question, because patently, the racing did a bit of research because jockeys wanted to wear, well, they didn't actually. Television companies wanted them to wear cameras on their hats to give them the bird's eye view. And they did a bit of research in whether they thought that was damaging. So did British Eventing, I think, at one stage. So whether that's part of the research that ought to go into helmets, do you need two different sorts of helmets design? One for hacking out, so forward-looking and rear-looking to capture those moments. Do you need a completely separate quality helmet for when you're competing? Interesting questions to perhaps add to that research equation. We are, in the Institute of Mechanical Engineering, actually we've heard quite a lot about mechanical engineering in relation to horses and safety today. And maybe this is an organisation we can engage, but more support for them in that relationship with us, that there are real areas here of research which they might be interested in. All of that research, there are a whole lot of variables. Everybody who rides has a slightly different perspective, slightly different set of data. But we have people here who have understanding of where that data is coming from. And that's going to make the difference, I think, in the end. So it won't just be about lumping the numbers. It will be people being able to analyse what those numbers really mean. Perceived level of safety was something that I heard of from years ago. It was a German scientist, actually. But his concept was that if you increase the perceived level of safety, i.e. equipment, people will increase their risk-taking behaviour because they inherently think they're safer. The real danger is that those who do that are then adding to that risk by doing things above their skill levels, so that the safety equipment doesn't make them any better. And somehow this is part of the educational process that's saying, no, this is really good safety equipment, yes, but understand what it means. It doesn't remove the risk. It may remove some of the damage when that risk turns into a problem, but it doesn't make you, as an individual, a better rider, and it doesn't make your horse any less unsafe when it makes a mistake. An extraordinary piece of research. They took so long to research that 85% were mistakes. I run an event, so I'm not going to comment on Jonathan Clissold's comments about British eventing and course design particularly, because I see that nearly every day, and I'm very old-fashioned, and I have different views. And I'm not sure what we're going to end up with, a rather fast show-jumping round if we're not careful. But the panel questions to these individuals, I think, highlighted some of those main concerns, issues. I'm really grateful, though, for the perspective that we've had from the Chief Constable, Dave Jones, and because so many people don't include that when they're thinking about horses and equines, and indeed living in a rural environment. And I'm particularly grateful that the police have got that concept in mind, because we do lose, as Jim makes a point in his head, that we do lose a lot of those in those professional areas who had grown up in the countryside and who understood where those weak spots were. But also the investment in countryside, the values of the things that people have now that are related to the countryside, both in equipment, tack and horses, makes it a very vulnerable area. And it's not just that, of course, is it? It's tack theft, and we were talking about dogs. Lots of people lose dogs, fashion items, and it's part of your life, and they go together with the horses. I was struck that actually in our local paper the other day, a fly tipping issue actually dumped it, closed an entire road, because they dumped so much stuff in a narrow road, it just closed the road. That's a huge achievement to have reached. But as you rightly point out, it's a worry that Jim's role is not now being funded. And I must, and Barter may well be able to lead the way, but we have colleges now, equine colleges, agricultural colleges, who have hugely increased their range of courses in terms of welfare and the backup education needed for all those work. And I wonder if they couldn't be persuaded that this might be something that they should include in the training packages as a norm rather than as an exception. And I hope there may be people here and listening in who might have a view on that. So I hope you all feel too that this has been a very interesting day. Lots to have been learnt from it. But I hope, more importantly, lots to continue to engage with. And both through the website that we now have, but also through the various individuals and bodies that were represented here. Because this forum, we can only do this once a year. These subjects don't go away. Continuing to collect the experiences, the information that come from you and those who are interested will make next year's forum even more interesting. And those who are trying to work to improve situations will give them a much better level of data to work from. So thank you for your involvement today. And finally, of course, it's a pleasure to be announcing the winner of this year's Sir Colin Spedding Award. The candidate, of course, is an individual or an organisation who's made an exceptional contribution to the world of horses, ponies or donkeys. And this year we have also had a strong field of nominations, and we have two finalists who are both here today, and we will find out the winner shortly. But you, as a delegate to the National Equine Forum, will be able to make a nomination for the 2019 Sir Colin Spedding Award on your feedback, and those watching on the live streaming can make a nomination via the website. The recipient, of course, gets a certificate of recognition to keep permanently, but does, of course, also get the bronze of the stag beetle, which is theirs for the year, and it is here. So thank you, Jim, if you give it back. So thank you very much for those nominations and your interest, and we look forward to next year's. So we hand over to Professor Pat Harris for that announcement.
Yes, thank you. We're going to acknowledge our finalist before moving on to the presentation for the Sir Colin Spedding Award. The British Grooms Association is our finalist in recognition of its pioneering work to raise the status of the groom in the equine sector, including professional development, relationships with employers, peer support and assistance for equestrian employers. And I'd like to point out that this initiative arose from discussions at one of these National Equine Forums. So Lucy, I'm personally very pleased, who founded the British Grooms Association, please come forward to the stage to collect your certificate from our President, Her Royal Highness, the Princess Royal.
Thank you very much.
And our winner, the Sir Colin Spedding Award for 2018 is presented to Dr. Simon John Curtis in recognition of his work in the development of corrective farriery and his long and ongoing service to equine science and welfare. And I'm very pleased to personally ask Simon, would you please come to the stage to take your certificate and the bronze stag beetle from our President, Her Royal Highness, the Princess Royal.
Ladies and gentlemen, that brings to the end this year's 26th National Equine Forum. Can I, on your behalf, thank our President, Her Royal Highness the Princess Royal, for her ongoing support and comments. It's really hugely appreciated. Thank you very much. Our President has concluded and highlighted a number of areas that are relevant, and we really do need your feedback on what you think forum, particularly for topics going forward. And as you'll be aware, we've gone on to Eventbrite. Eventbrite does quite a lot of feedback surveys, so please, can you look in your inbox your Eventbrite thing and fill it in? It won't take very long. But your views are really important to the organising committee. The second thing to say is that we couldn't do this without a very active organising committee. So I'm really grateful for the help that the organising committee give to us. And in particular, if it wasn't for Georgina Crossman, this wouldn't happen. So thank you to the organising committee, and a round of applause particularly for Georgina. For those of you who are vaguely worrying bent, the date of the 2019 forum is the 7th of March, but we'll probably live without that. So but you'll know about that. So can I thank you all very much for attending. I hope you found it interesting, and have a safe journey home. Thanks very much. And please, can you remain seated while our President...
Well, that's it for the National Equine Forum 2018. I hope you've enjoyed the live stream today. The guest speakers have been incredible. So we're already looking forward to next year. Pop it in your diary. It's the 7th of March 2019. And if you missed anything from today, then don't worry. You can watch everything again on the website, nationalequineforum.com. We also have a selection of podcasts available for you, which are some of the guest speakers from today talking for half an hour about their interests, whether it was equestrian safety. I did talk to Sue Dyson. I spoke to Nigel Oakley as well about the heavy horses. Really, really interesting conversations. So have a look at the website. You can also see our website, horsehour.co.uk, for other podcasts. And thank you for getting involved in this year's National Equine Forum. And I have to say a massive thank you to the friends of the forum and to the supporters as well, because without you, without the support, then events like this wouldn't be able to happen. And by us getting together and discussing the issues, hopefully we can actually make a difference. So I look forward to seeing you next year.
Probably the most shocking thing was that it was like a graveyard with the walking dead.
They had so many lice on them that we had to do a full body clip to get rid of all the parasites before we could even start treating them.
The scale of it seemed enormous.
I think it opened the eyes of many members of the British public who hadn't seen animal cruelty before.
These horses weigh more than half a ton. Imagine what would happen if you hit one. Since 2010, more than 2,900 road incidents involving horses have been reported to the British Horse Society. Of these, 39 caused rider deaths and 230 resulted in a horse dying from their injuries or being put to sleep. No matter how you feel about horses on the road, it's important to be aware that colliding with one puts you and your vehicle at serious risk. By following these simple steps, you can help protect yourself, your car, and the people around you. When you come across a horse and rider or carriage driver, immediately begin to slow down. Be patient. Wait far enough behind the horse so that you're able to see some tarmac between you and the horse's hooves until the road is clear to safely pass. Don't sound your horn or rev your engine. Pass slowly at a maximum speed of 15 miles per hour and give the horse plenty of room. When you're clear of the horse, carefully move back over to your side of the road and drive away slowly. Only pass a horse if it's safe to do so. Don't try and rush past ahead of oncoming traffic or if vehicles are parked on the opposite side of the road or on a hill or a blind bend. Trying to save a couple of seconds could prove very costly. Horses are animals, and like all animals, even the calmest and most experienced can become scared or intimidated. If the horse becomes unsettled, please be patient and give the rider time to react. Please be respectful that at times, riders may need to ride two abreast. Often this is to protect young or inexperienced horses or riders. Be aware that the rider may ask you to slow down or stop and wait. Riders can often see and hear things that you can't. So to recap, when passing horses, slow down to 15 miles per hour. Be patient. Don't sound your horn or rev your engine. Pass horses wide, at least a car's width. Drive slowly away. Remember, it's not just a horse that will suffer when involved in a road incident. The impact can cause significant damage to a vehicle and the people in it. Don't let this be you. Protect yourself, protect your vehicle, protect horses and riders.